Hail and well met, traveler. Oh, yes, today is March 11th, 2022. Who am I? Oh, my name is Ruan. I'm a humble witch and fairy friend. Today, I'm going to tell the story of the Golden Apple. It comes to us from an ancient text called the Gesta Romanorum. Once upon a time, there was a king who had only one son, whom he loved above all else. At great expense, he had a golden apple crafted. When it was ready, the king fell ill, summoned his son, and told him, "My dear child, I shall not survive this illness. I give you my blessing, and after my death, travel the world over, taking the golden apple with you. And when you find the stupidest of all men, give it to him for love of me." The prince promised that he would fulfill this vow. His father turned his face to the wall and died. After the funeral, the prince took the apple and left. He met many imbeciles, studied them closely, but did not give any of them the apple. He reached a certain country and entered its capital. He saw the king riding to the city on horseback, accompanied by his court, and asked several inhabitants about local customs. "It is customary among us for the king to reign for only 1 year," they told him. "When that year ends, he must go into exile and die in disgrace." Once he heard these words, the prince thought, "I have just found what I've been seeking for so long." He made his way to the monarch, knelt, greeted him, and said, "Good morning, your majesty. My father died and left you this apple." The sovereign took it and asked, "Dear friend, how was this possible? I have never seen your father, the king, and I have never done anything for him. Why would he leave me such a valuable object?" He said, "Your Majesty, my father did not leave this apple to you expressly. When he gave me his blessing, he charged me with giving it to the biggest idiot I could find. I have traveled through many countries, and it is certain that I have not found anyone crazier than you. I have therefore fulfilled my father's wishes by granting you this apple. Explain to me why it is exactly me whom you have found to be most stupid," the king asked him. "Very well, sire, I will explain it to you," the prince replied. "In your country, it is customary for the sovereign to rule for only 1 year, then lose all honor and wealth, go into exile, and die in misery. By my faith, there is no one in the world as foolish as you. To rule for such a short time and then die so miserably? What you say is true. During my short reign, as long as I am in power, I send immense quantities of wealth abroad so that I will be able to live on it until my death." He put his words into action. At the end of the year, he lost his throne and left the country. He lived for a long time on his riches and ended his life in peace. When I first read this story, I could see the simple motive of kingship. It is better to rule long and then die than to give up one's power to another. I could see why the prince of the golden apple would give the apple to the short-lived king. It would sound stupid to let power so easily slip from his fingers. I'm sure many of you likewise would give the golden apple to this king. But then I started to look between the lines. If we take into consideration that all folklore holds deeper truths, and that wisdom has survived over the generations, then we have to look deeper. I looked into other myths that have a golden apple as the center of the tale. I reread the story of Eris and her golden apple of discord, which started the Trojan War. I read the tale of Idun and her golden apple's immortality. I even looked at the story of the Garden of Eden and the Genesis account. But see, while the golden apple is important, it isn't as important as the meeting of worldviews is. The Prince of the Golden Apple is clearly our understanding of people and power. That which I gain, I hold, while the Idiot King is of a different sort. In the Idiot King, I see a vague image of the Sacred King. A specific term is delineated. But you see, this Idiot King has already made the proper preparations for when he will leave office. He stores for himself treasure and wealth outside the realm for his future benefit. In the motif of the Sacred King and our understanding of the wilderness, that which is outside the bounds of the kingdom is the other world. Yonder in the forest dwells Gwyn ap Neath. It is said that many of the ancient Welsh used to say concerning the king of the dead in Annwn, to go into exile is death. The wealth that he has acquired for himself have become gifts to them over there, and he has secured for himself powerful allies. Though he may have no honor among his people anymore, such as his name being forgotten, he lives well into old age and dies in peace, meaning that he has no need for accumulation of the stuff of this world. We also see within this story the battle between one faith and another faith, the old ways and the new ways. See, the Idiot King could be symbolic of the eternal cycle of renewal inherent in the stories of Gaia and Uranus, Rhea and Cronus, ending with Zeus breaking the cycle of killing the old king by the young king. The year king to be replaced by an eternal king, much like Jesus. Could the Prince of the Golden Apple be seen as such a eternal king? Because he's been raised to view that if you have sovereignty, you keep a hold on it. You don't just let it go. But see, the golden apple is also symbolic of another metal, bronze, as in the Bronze Age, when we saw the rise of such gods as never received death and an ending of their rule, like fair Zeus, who never had to die from the hands of his own son. The Idiot King represents the old Neolithic societies, whereas the Prince of the Golden Apple represents the patriarchal cultures that came to replace them. The Golden Apple, being connected with Adun and immortality, can also possibly connect to a sacred drink, and that the prince represents the beakerware culture, which used henbane to bring on visions and make them the sons of the sun god. These people were indeed patriarchal, and may not have kings in the way that we understand them today, but it was certainly men who held this power, and as we see, men do not like to let go of power. So the Idiot King is Saturn, and his exile is from the rulership of the gods, ushering in the change in regime. The place that he sent his wealth, the other world, could be his kingdom of misrule, a golden age, kind of seen within the later tales of the realm of Elfhame in the Elysian Fields. And so, even in this very small, very fragmented tale from the Gesta Romanorum, we see inherent within folk tales a dim remembrance of something that has gone before. So there is so much to unpack in this tale. And honestly, if I had more time to prepare for this episode, I'm sure I could have done a better job. And I might still write an article over it on my Patreon. It is my belief that the old fairy tales hold great lessons, and that behind them all, one can find hints of true interactions with entities that we now call fairy, and the Neolithic culture that was subsumed by other cultures, which were decidedly patriarchal, misogynistic, and transcendent, namely Indo-European. And people would say, what is wrong with this? Why would we want to see a change in cycle? And that's a deep, deep mystery on why I am so against patriarchal cultures. Why I would side with the idiot king as versus the prince of the golden apple. And that is because I have no desire for control over, which is inherent in kingship. You control over other people and their own self-sovereignty. But every other week, I will be doing another episode of A Dragon's Voice. I will be bringing in folk tales from across the planet and kind of giving my own little view on its symbolism, its import, and I really didn't have time to do much preparations for this video, even though it's been 2 weeks since my last video. And that's because I've had a lot of stuff on my plate. I recently finished my second year with the Temple of Witchcraft Mystery School, receiving my initiation as a priest of witchcraft according to that tradition. And this, of course, has brought a host of other issues upon my door. For instance, I've had to really rethink my views on things, the things I want to do with my future as a professional witch. It has really shaken up everything around me. And I think that I'm prepared to give more time and service to the community at large. And so this is going to be a very interesting transitional period as I'm contemplating on going to Witchcraft 3 in their mystery school, which will touch more on stuff that I've done the last 2 years, and that is shadow work. That is shadow work. And so I hope that after this episode, things will be a little more situated. I'll have a better understanding of where I'm going to take A Dragon's Voice, my own work, and where my place in the greater whole, the big web of people out there that practice a form of witchcraft. I know things have been very, very hectic for me, and that it may seem like my whole heart isn't in to what I've been doing on the video. But it's not necessarily true. I'm going through a big set of changes and an understanding of my personal worldview with over 30 years of study and practice in various forms of the occult, of religion and history, and my views on why magic works, whom the fairy are and how it all intersects. And so, like, one thing I was asked before I took my initiation was, as people know, I do weddings and hand fastings and stuff for those in the local area. And I used to do them from a standpoint of metaphysics. And so usually I felt I could get away with doing various types of weddings, even weddings with a Christian connotation to them. And I've found myself take a step back. I cannot speak for an entity that, one, I have great anger towards, and there's many reasons for that, and the life path that it engenders in their adherents. And so I was asked if I would still officiate a specific ceremony for a specific set of people who have chosen to go the ritual from the point of view of a Christian faith to appease, supposedly to appease others, so that people would actually show up and stuff. And I had to decline because I do not speak for a monotheistic entity. I surely am hell not its priest. It's I do not speak or work on that worldview's behalf in any way, shape, or form. And so this naturally caused a lot of drama. And so it was kind of off-putting. It kind of put a dim on my week. And so I've been more focusing on that than I was on working on the script for this episode, which is why it's so short, not as detailed as I had planned. I'd also planned on doing a certain set of rituals as part of my video, because my end goal with A Dragon's Voice is that it be like any typical coven meeting that I would have with, my own coven, such as, having an alimentum or cakes and ale type ceremony in alignment with fairy traditionalism, that we would go into ritual consciousness together, and that we would fellowship. Yes, very much. Might have the same kind of connotations as a weekly sermon, which is a requirement for any organization that is approved by the IRS as an official church type thing. And so that is where my ultimate goal is, where I will open up with getting into ritual consciousness. We would have a alimentum or a cakes and ale type ceremony where bread and drink and stuff are shared as a people. I would bring in some pertinent information, such as maybe a fairy folk tale, maybe a cultural myth that would be discussed, picked apart, maybe a little exercise, followed by coming out of ritual consciousness and the ending of the video. So that is my end goal. A Dragon's Voice goal is to be a gathering, a gathering, a fellowship, um, sitting around the fire, just telling tales and building community. And so I'm planning on doing that bi-weekly. I don't want to rush. I don't want to sit there and push myself too hard like I did last time when I started getting out there and doing my thing. But I've had so many freaking mental wake up calls and stuff since finishing the Outer Temple of Witchcraft course with the Temple of Witchcraft. Especially concerning the idea of sacred kingship. Now, in my own coven, I go by a title, an office within the coven structure, within the covenant, and it is drawn from my Welsh ancestry, and it is Pendraig, or Chief Dragon, head of the dragon, from whence we get the word Pendragon, Arthurian mythos, and the like. Very much Sacred King stuff right there. And with that, a dragon's voice is to be the, God, I hate that term, outreach, arm of the coven, so to speak. But I've been really contemplating the Sacred King cycle lately, because in a way, that's what happens when you achieve a priesthood within Wicca, witchcraft. You know, if you go on the masculine form of spirituality, and I mean that not in the sense of gender identity and or anything like that. What I mean is from the old tales of the king that would die on behalf of his people, sacrificed in sacred ritual to bring more harmony and the fecundity of the earth. So we're talking about like tales of, like I mentioned earlier, the story of Rhea and Kronos, of Uranus and Gaia, the eternal cycle of the Year King. And to me, Pendraig is very similar to the idea from the story of Pwyll Penanun. Because to me, the dragon is the earth and all of its inhabitants. The great beast would be like Gwyn ap Neath, holding within him the whole hosts of hell. And so to be at the head of the dragon, to be the chief of Anun, is to have fellowship with the unseen realm. And since I got time, I wanted to actually read part of Mabinogi. I have the Patrick K. Ford version, which of course you can't see because I'm using a background. And we see in the story of the first branch of the Mabinogi how sacred kingship kind of happens. It's not something that's really focused upon. You know, like when they think sacred king, most people go with the story of the Oak King and the Holly King. They do the Arthurian mythos of, you know, the old stag and the young stag. But even within the Mabinogi, we see how Pwyll really becomes a sacred king. We see him receive the title held chiefly by the king of Anun himself, and that is Pen Anun, the head of Anun. Now, in the first part of the story of Puir, we are introduced almost immediately to Gwyn ap Neith in his aspect of Arun. And it starts with a stag hunt. So there you also see, like what's mentioned in like Mists of Avalon, you see, what of the old king when the young king is grown? What of the old stag when the young stag is grown? The stag that Puil hunts in, who hunts for, as will be mentioned, if we think of each entity as having personhood, and in Glen Cylgh, where he hunts as going into the outside, like in the story of the Golden Apple, outside of the kingdom, you're going into the realm of the unseen. You're going into the wilderness. And so the stag itself is an entity being harvested, is the soul of a fairy creature. It is one of us who has been chosen by Arun to be harvested. But we'll go ahead and get into the tale, and I hope you enjoy. Puil, Prince of Dyved, was lord over the 7 cantrefs of Dyved. One time he was in Arbroath, his principal court, and it came into his head and mind to go hunting. The part of his realm he wished to hunt was called Glen Cylgh. He set out that night from Arbroath and came as far as Pen Ruan de Heydon, where he stayed that night. And I am butchering the Cymraeg. I am butchering the Welsh because I am still learning, to be honest. And sometimes old anglicized habits are hard to kill. So this is not necessarily how these words are pronounced, just as a caveat. And there he stayed the night. The following day at dawn he rose and came to Glen Cylgh to let his hounds loose in the woods. He sounded his horn, began to muster the hunt, and set off behind his dogs. But he got separated from his companions. So he is outside of the protection of civilization, not even protected by his own people. He is alone. As he was listening to the cry of his hunting pack, he heard the cry of another, and they were not the same. The other was coming towards his own. He could see a clearing in the woods, a kind of level field, and as his own pack reached the edge of the clearing, he could see a stag in front of the other. Toward the middle of the clearing, the pack chasing the stag overtook it and bore it to the ground. He looked at the color of the hounds, not bothering to look at the stag, and of all the hunting dogs he had seen in the world, he had never seen dogs the color of them. Glittering bright white was their color, and their ears red. The redness of the ears glittered as brightly as the whiteness of their bodies. Thereupon he came to the dogs and drove off the pack that had killed the stag, feeding his own pack upon it. Breaking of taboo. Very bad breaking of taboo. As he was feeding the dogs, he saw a horseman coming up behind the pack on a large dapple gray horse, a hunting horn about his neck, wearing a pale gray garment for hunting gear. Thereupon the horseman came to him, saying as follows, "Chieftain," he said, "I know who you are, but I will not greet you." "Well," said the other, "perhaps your rank does not require it." "The gods know," he exclaimed. "It is not the obligation of my rank that prevents me." "What else, chieftain?" asked the other. "I swear to the gods," he said, "by your own ignorance and your discourtesy." "What discourtesy have you seen in me, chieftain?" "No greater discourtesy have I seen in a man," he replied, "than driving off the pack to kill the stag and feeding your own pack upon it. That," he continued, was discourtesy. And though I shall not take revenge upon you, I swear to the gods, he said, I will have you satirized to the value of 100 stags. Chieftain, he said, if I have committed a wrong, I will sue for peace with you. On what terms? Asked the other. Such as your rank may require, but I don't know who you are. I am a crowned king in the land from which I hail. Lord, he said, good day to you. What land do you come from? Anuvan, he replied. I am Arun, king of Anuvan. Lord, he said, how shall I gain peace with you? Here is how you shall gain it, he began. A man whose realm borders on mine makes war on me continually. He is Hafgun, a king of Anuvan. For delivering me from his oppression, and you can do that easily, you will have peace from me. I will do that gladly, he replied. Tell me how I may accomplish it. All right, he said. Here's how you shall do it. I will form a strong bond with you in this way. I will put you in my place in Anuvan and give you the fairest woman you have ever seen to sleep with you every night. You will have my shape and manner, so that neither chamberlain nor officer nor any other who has ever followed me shall know that you are not I. And that until the end of a year from tomorrow, when we meet in this place. Well, he said, though I be there until the end of the year, what information will I have to find the man of whom you speak? He and I are due to meet a year from tonight at the ford, he explained, and you be there in my place. Give him but a single blow. He will not survive that. And though he may beg you to strike again, don't. However he may plead with you, no matter how many more I would give him, he would attack me the next day as well as before. Well, said Puil, what shall I do with my kingdom? I will arrange that no man or woman in your realm shall know that I am not you, said Arun. I will go in your place. Gladly, said Puil. I will set forth. Your path will be smooth and nothing will obstruct you until you come to my realm. I will be your guide. He escorted him until he saw the court and dwellings. There, he said, is the court and realm in your power. Approach the court. There is none in it that shall not know you, and as you observe the practices there, you will come to know the court's customs. He approached the court, and inside he could see sleeping quarters, halls, and chambers, and the most beautifully ornamented buildings anyone had seen. He went into the hall to change his dress. Lads and young attendants came to assist him in removing his gear, and each greeted him as he came. 2 horsemen came to remove his hunting garments and dress him in gold brocade. The hall was set in order, and then he could see entering a war band and hosts, the most splendid and best equipped troop that anyone had ever seen. The queen was with them, the fairest woman anyone had ever seen, dressed in a glittering gold brocaded garment. Thereupon they washed, went to the table, and sat in this way. The queen on his one side, and the earl, he supposed, on the other. He began to converse with the queen, and as for talking with her, she was the noblest and gentlest in her nature, and her discourse of any he had ever seen. And they passed the time in food and drink, with songs and entertainment. Of all the courts he had seen on earth, this was the court best supplied with food and drink, gold vessels and royal treasures. The time came for them to go to sleep, and to sleep they went, he and the queen. As soon as they got into bed, he turned his face toward the edge of the bed, and with his back toward her. From that moment until the next morning, he spoke not a single word to her. On the following day, there was tenderness and loving discourse between them, but whatever affection would be between them during the day, there was not a single night for the rest of the year different from the first night. He spent the year in hunting and songs and festivity, in affection and conversation with friends, until the night of the encounter came. a night remembered as well by the most remote inhabitant of the entire land as it was by him. He came to the appointed place, accompanied by nobles of his realm. The moment he came to the ford, a horseman arose and spoke as follows. Men, he said, listen well. This encounter is between the two kings, and between their two bodies alone. If only our modern leaders would do the same thing. Each of them is a claimant against the other, and that concerning land and territory. And each of you can stand aside and leave it between them two. Thereupon the two kings made for the middle of the ford to clash. At the first blow, the man who was in Arun's place struck Halfkin in the middle of the boss of his shield, so that it split in half and all the armor shattered. And Halfkin went the length of his arm and spear over his horse's rump to the ground, a mortal thrust in him. Chieftain, said Halfkin, what right did you have to my death? I claim nothing from you, nor do I know any cause for you to kill me. But for the sake of the gods, he said, since you have begun to kill me, finish. Chieftain, said the other, I could regret doing what I did to you. Find someone who will kill you. I will not. My loyal nobles, Halfkin said, take me hence. My death is assured. I have no means to support you any longer. Men of mine, said the man who was in Arun's place, take accounts and find out who owes allegiance to me. Lord, said the nobles, all owe it, for there is no king over all of Anuvan, except you. Well, he said, those who come in peace, it is proper to receive. But those who do not come peacefully, let them be compelled by sword. And then he received homage of the men and began to take possession of the land. By noon of the next day, the two realms were in his power. And then he set out for his rendezvous and came to Glen Cook, where he arrived. Arun, king of Anuvan, was waiting for him. They greeted each other. Well, said Arun, may gods repay you your friendship. I've heard about it. Yes, said the other. When you reach your land, you will see what I have done for you. For what you have done on my behalf, may the gods repay you. Then Arun restored Puil, prince of Dyved, to his own shape and form, took for himself his own form and shape, and set out for his own court in Anuvan. It gave him pleasure to see his host and his retinue, since he had not been there for a year. But on their part, they had not felt his loss, so there was nothing extraordinary about his coming. He passed that day in pleasure and joy, sitting and conversing with his wife and his nobles. And when the period of entertainment was past and it was time to sleep they went. He got into a bed, and his wife went with him. First he talked to her, then engaged in affectionate play, and made love to her. She had not been accustomed to that for a year, and she thought about that. Dear God, she thought, what a different mind he has tonight from what he has had for the past year. And she thought for a long time, and after her musing, he awoke and said something to her, and again, and a third time, but he got no answer from her. Why don't you speak to me? He asked. I tell you, she replied, that I haven't spoken this much for a year under these circumstances. Why? He said. We have talked continually. Shame on me, she said, if from the time we went between the sheets there was either pleasure or talk between us, or even your facing me, much less anything more than that for the past year. And he thought, blessed gods, it was a unique man with strong and unwavering friendship that I got for a companion. And then he said to his wife, Lady, he said, don't blame me. I swear to the gods, he said, I haven't slept with you since a year from last night, nor have I lain with you. And he told her the entire tale. I confess to the gods, she said, as far as fighting temptations of the flesh and keeping true to you goes, you had a solid hold on a fellow. Lady, he said, that's just what I was thinking while I was silent with you. That was only natural, she answered. Meanwhile, Puil, prince of Dyved, came to his realm and country, and he began to query the nobles of the country about what their governance had been during that year, compared to what had been prior to that. Lord, they said, your discernment has never been so good. Never have you been so amiable a fellow. Never have you been so ready to spend your gain. Your rule has never been better than this past year. I swear to the gods, he said, it is right for you to thank the man who has been with you. Here's the story, just as it was. And Pwyll told it all. Well, Lord, they said, thank the gods you acquired that friendship. And the governance we got. You'll not withdraw from us, surely. I will not. I swear to the gods my people swear by, said Pwyll. And from that time on, they began to strengthen their friendship, and sent each other horses, hunting dogs, hawks, and treasures of the sort that each supposed would give pleasure to the other. Because of his living for that year in the Nuven, and ruling it so successfully, and bringing the two realms together by virtue of his bravery and valor, his name, Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, fell out of use, and he came to be called Pwyll, head of a Nuven, or Penanun, henceforth. Now, in that tale, we see the power of a true sacred king, of one who is an intermediary, an intercessor on behalf of his or her people with the unseen realm. For Arun, Anuven, being the unseen itself. So we have a building of friendship, a very powerful ally. For Pwyll himself, his ally was Arun, Gwyn ap Neith, the devil. And of course, I speak of the folkloric devil, the devil that is many places and yet the wind and dweller himself. The queen, which Pwyll slept next to, is Guinevere, Crythalad. In the story of Gwyn ap Neith, it would be Crythalad. And we have an earth goddess. We have a Rhea figure here. And so, by not bedding the queen, he showed honor to Arun, because in that culture, if something like that happened, you shared your woman, you shared your lady sovereignty. If she so chose, you didn't force it upon her. But since Pwyll did not have a wife, it would have been very rude. It would have been breaking of sacred taboo to have a dalliance with Arun's woman, his queen, without giving, his own in return. He didn't want to break another freaking taboo, because that's what got him in the mess in the first place, was taking what did not belong to him. To bed Arun's wife would be taking what did not belong to him. And so we see here where a person who gives offerings to them unseen receives gifts from his alliances and builds his own fairy tale can be seen in the story of future tales. For wouldn't the Penanun also be considered a Pendragon? For he became the voice of Anuven, literally dwelling there in Death's place, like an episode of Supernatural, where you have Dean stepping in for Death himself and trying to do Death's job. So, with this idea of sacred kingship, with becoming a priest in the Temple of Witchcraft, and where my own sovereignty lies, I've had to pick out some pretty gnarly truths that have offended many people that I have had alliances with, that I've gotten to know, and in many ways it has caused me to really do a lot of deep soul searching concerning what I talk on, what who I let into my circle of influence, into my kingdom, the kingdom of my own sovereignty. And so I've had less time to sit in front of a computer screen, type out scripts, work on those things that I do need to work on, such as my websites, such as articles on Patreon, um, and many other things. For this idea of sovereignty, and I hope that in this recount of a couple tales, you can find some own piece of wisdom to apply to your own life. And if you have an idea or want to ask a question and have it answered on a future episode, let me know, because things are about to get really lit over here. I've got a lot of stuff planned. I'm going to take it inch by inch, but it's time. Just bear with me. If you want access to the future articles and stuff that I'm putting together, that I have worked on, that I'm editing and stuff like that, you can go become a Patreon patron over at patreon.com/Ruan de Heydon. I've got a few. I've got links. I've got a few other articles I've written. I've got access to previous videos that I've done, particularly on fairy traditionalism, the work of the Cylgh An Carow Gwyn, um, and my breachings and my own alliances, the building of my own fairy tale. Um, and of course, I'm still working on my website, um, and that is at ruandeheydon.com. I will be beginning courses and classes. Those will be available for Patreon patrons. I'm working on setting up those tier levels, getting that stuff all ready. I've got a freaking notebook that I've got things ready to go. I just need to finalize a few things. Start creating some PowerPoints to go with them. And hopefully here soon, I will begin my first actual course with the fairy faith as its focus. I'll once again cover my understandings of the Oath of Belonging. I'll cover some pertinent fairy folk tales that's more pertinent in my understanding on my own practice. Because, like I said, I can only speak for me. I cannot speak for anyone else out there. You know, I cannot speak for any other witch, pagan, heathen. I can only speak on my own path. And while I utilize Robin Artison's works predominantly in this, I can't speak for him. I cannot speak for the Cylgh An Carow Gwyn, of which I am a part. I can't even speak on for the folk of Diwenis, of which I am an Oath Taken member. I can only speak of myself. And so, hopefully, things will get moving and you like what you like, and we can go from there. I'm a very awkward person, made more awkward by my peculiarity of my own personal path. And so, even just doing these videos is very difficult for me. And so, I hope you enjoyed. Next time, I'm going to go into the next part of a Mabinogi in the first branch. Like I said, this was the translation that I currently am using is by Patrick Ford, and so there's a lot of Christian glosses on there that I've tried to steer away from. Instead of God or as God wills and stuff. Gods, goddesses, to kind of give it that more pagan veneer. But we'll continue that tale in 2 weeks' time. And in order to close this video, I am going to do a quick tarot reading. Because I love this tarot deck. This is the tarot deck I mentioned a few weeks ago called Territorial. The ultimate tarot training deck put out by Raven and Rogue. And of course, not really able to see that. But anyways. And I draw 3 cards in honor of the 3 Norns, the 3 Fates, the 3 great-grandmothers of us all, the sun, the moon, and the fertile earth. For the god, the goddess, and the great spirit. And we have the 9 of Wands, the 6 of Swords, and the Hermit. So the 9 of Wands is associated with Aries, Leo, but Sagittarius as well, and of the element of fire. Wands being fire, willpower. Now, things may seem tough, really tough right now, almost insurmountable. But if you stand firm and ride out the storm, you're going to have what it takes to make it to the finish line, to make your goal. You do have a support system. Trust in yourself and receive help when it is offered. Then we have the 6 of Swords, which is connected to Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. It's an air symbol. Swords being with intellect, knowledge. And with the 6 of Swords, we are seeing a transition, a moving on, a change, a rite of passage and release. We're in a state of transition where we are all being forced out of our comfort zone or from a difficult past. And we're headed towards uncharted territory. This move is crucial for our growth individually and globally. Whether we want it or not. Now, take the time, honestly take the time to reflect on your own emotional baggage that you may be carrying as you are moving between these phases and see what you may be willing to leave behind. Which leads us to the Hermit reversed. Now, the Hermit is connected to Mercury, the planet, and Virgo. It is Earth. It is solidification. It is, in this one, we may be feeling loneliness. We may feel isolated or even our own exile. There's definitely sadness, but you're feeling almost like a misfit. I feel our species collectively is just like really all. See, the thing is a seclusion at this time may do more harm than good. It will cause you to get lost in a world all your own and not the real world. Now, be sure to connect with those around you. The hermit is also implying the need to investigate something that may have been troubling you. Now, in this, we can see many things. We can see the stuff that's going on with Russia and Ukraine. We can see this building rise towards lots of talk of World War III and all that stuff. But the thing is that we are dismantling so many pillars that has held civilization together. We are seeing behind the curtain of the lies that we have been fed. We've heard that capitalism is so much better than communism, when all our modern capitalism really is just feudalism repackaged. We have seen that our move from monarchy, our move from monarchy and aristocracy to Republican democracy and frickin' oligarchy isn't much different. We have not moved beyond anything. We've just changed titles and terms and called it better. We called it the best. The thing is we are not far removed from monarchy. We are not far removed from aristocracy, where people can sit there and buy authority by being rich enough. We are robber barons and tinker kings are now lawyers and politicians. And whoever has the money makes the rules. But see, we're at that point again where a revolution is growing, where the 99% are finally willing to stand up and tell the 1% enough is enough. May it continue forward, but be not an island. Be not an island. But put up good boundaries, solid fortifications, and let's just say, prepare. Prepare. All I can say is prepare, because things are going to get really fun really quick. Because honestly, there's only so far the world will go. Oh, well, the world will let happen with Russia and Ukraine before they say enough is enough. And the thing is, if you go back to all my previous videos, all of them, A Dragon's Voice, Fairy Fridays, you go through all of them, Tarot Tuesday even, here on my YouTube, go and look through. I mean, you can skip in places and stuff like that, you know, but these are the things that I've been mentioning all along. These are the Great Wars. We are seeing a war against old ways and new ways. New ways that used to be the old ways. We are seeing a rise in the people of the planet. And we can either go to annihilation and death as a species, Or we could take a new route, a new path, and really make something of ourselves. And so with that, my friends, I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope, you got some piece of wisdom from it. And things are going to improve. It's going to be a lot better next time around, because I've got outlines and stuff all set out. I'm just ready to do a bunch of finalization on things, and things will be hype. So may you never hunger, may you never thirst, and may the good neighbors always bless you.